and the other is equally close to A and E. Determine the location of the buildings. Okay, so in order to be equally distant from A and E, it has to be on that blue line. Do we agree with that? Okay. In order to be equally distant from D and E, it's got to be on that line, correct? Okay. The buildings are 2.5 kilometers north of each other. So one's 2.5 kilometers north, the other is south. So what you know here is these buildings have to be on the vertical line that touch both the blue line and the green line. Because that's the only way they can be north of each other, is if they're stacked right on the same vertical line, correct? So what you've got to do now is go through that graph and find points that are on both lines, on a vertical line here, that are 2.5 kilometers away from each other. So each line represents 1 kilometer, right?
Yes.
Right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we go and we look at it. You've got a point right here. If I go straight up, you've got a point right there. 1, 2.5. There are your two buildings. That's it.
The thing I was scared most with this homework, I'm scared I didn't show enough work. Because everything seemed pretty much like A. I didn't think I had to show work.
No, that's
And I only have like 3/4 of a page worth
that's
of
all right.
work.
Yeah, that was really easy. Part A,
Okay.
Part A is going to be real easy. Okay, so it's just these points. Does that make sense? Do we understand why they have to be on that vertical line? Yeah. You said no. Yep, 2.5 kilometers north of each other. So if one building is north of the other, it's got to be above it. And for them to be equal distant from A and E and D and E, that's how we know they have to be on these two lines. Because this line right here that I drew in blue is equidistant from A and E. This line that I drew in green was equidistant from D and E. So that's how we know both points have to be on those lines. We're just looking for the ones that are 2.5 kilometers north of each other. Okay? Because if I would have done this point right here and that point right there, yeah, those are on the same vertical line, but those are only 1 kilometer apart. That's not the 2.5 that we need. Those are actually 2.5 kilometers apart. You've got a point right there, and you've got a point right there. Well, unfortunately, those are 6 kilometers apart. Yeah, they're still both perfectly north of each other, and they both fall on those lines that show they're equidistant from those two locations. But the only one that works that's actually 2.5 kilometers apart are the two located at these 2 points. Anything else? All right, put your name on that. Pass that forward. And you are definitely 100% going to need some version of graph paper today.
Oh, fun.
No, just label what part.
You willing to donate?
Part A, right side. They don't try to squeeze all that stuff on the line. Flip to the second. So flip to the very end. I do not have any. Good afternoon. Can I see one of your post-it notes? No.
Sal, Sadie. I was just talking to Sal. Did you really turn that video into the classroom? No, you did not. You're going to show me. Oh, you read it. He still hasn't said anything about mine, the note down.
He said,
Okay, so today is the last section that we are going to cover before our first test.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
Is that fire alarm?
Yeah. I am in a very tough situation right now. Because everything in me says your test should be Friday.
Oh. We don't get a review day?
That's what Wednesday's going to be.
Oh, okay. I'm off.
Say what? It is an alternate schedule. That's the only thing that's...
Oh, yeah, because of the
You have
assembly.
15 fewer minutes.
Could it be a two-part? That Miss Stockton last year would like do two parts, but
So, right now, you need to prepare for the test to be on Friday. Okay? Point blank, you need to prepare as if the tests were on Friday, and I'm going to continue to think about it, and I'll give you a definitive answer on Wednesday. But right now, you need to be prepared for your test to be on Friday.
how are your tests usually set up? Like average question counts?
90 minutes.
No question. Like how
90 minutes.
90. Oh.
Every test has a different amount of questions. It depends on the difficulty level of the questions. What I do with the test is I write a test and I sit down and take it. If it takes me longer than 30 minutes to take a test, I do not give it to you. Okay? I give you guys triple time to take a test. Okay?
That's what you were really dumb about.
It shouldn't, because I've been doing math a lot longer than
He's
you.
got a degree in math, so he has more than one degree.
He has 3 degrees.
He is very careful.
So that's it. Okay?
I'm not panicking, which is very
Oh,
shocking.
you're the only one.
Failed. Only student not to get a passing grade.
The only one
All right, so today we are starting with section 17B. So guys, flip to page 422. We're starting with 17B.
Court No, tell me how
17B should be 422.
She's gonna hear our plan.
Okay, so last class, we said we did a lot of stuff with those Voronoi diagrams. Okay, in order to construct a Voronoi diagram, you have all of those points on the graph. What do? How do you create those lines in between all of the, how do you create those edges between all of our sites?
You have to find the equidistance between
And what do
two points.
what line do we put in the middle that's equidistant from those points? It's the edge, but the edge is the specific,
Side?
it's a perpendicular bisector. Okay? So, to separate sites, we construct perpendicular bisectors. Okay? Between every site, we will put up a perpendicular bisector. Now, in the beginning, it is best practice to draw dotted lines. Now, the reason that's the best practice is, guys, we're going to be doing a lot of erasing. Because once these, graphs are the only thing you're allowed to do in pencil. Yeah. In IB math, graphs are the only thing that you're allowed to do in pencil. Okay? Last class, what is the name of the point where multiple edges meet?
Vertex.
A vertice. So the reason we want to draw these dotted lines in is because where those vertices are created, those are going to be our boundaries. We're not going to be able to extend our line outside that point. But you won't know where that point is until you have multiple edges drawn. Okay? So there is going to be a lot of drawing and erasing with this stuff. Okay? And because of that, it would probably be in your best interest to have a straight edge.
Straight edge.
Okay, so once those make their way around, we're going to start with example 1 for today,
Why don't I see an example?
and that's going to be example 3 on page 425. Okay. Okay. So while you're getting this ready, again, try not to look at the bottom part of that box, because all that's going to do is it's going to give you the answer. Okay?
Oh, God, I don't know how to cover it up.
Well, don't worry about it. I mean, if you look at it, you look at it. It's not the end of the world, but
So we need graph paper for this, okay?
yep. So the first thing it's going to say, okay, guys, when you look at that picture on page 425, one of the things it could ask you on the exam is that diagram missing an edge? Yes or no? Yes, it is.
Oh?
Okay. Why is that diagram missing an edge? Where is the edge missing from?
Is it like in...
B and C.
There is not an edge separating B and C. Do you guys see that? B and C are in the same cell. That's not allowed to happen. Okay? So your graph is clearly missing an edge, and it's the edge in between points, or sites, excuse me, B and C. So the first thing that we all need to do is we need to draw the graph exactly like it is. Okay? So I'm going to do it, you're going to do it, grab your graph paper and draw that exactly as is. Guys, outside of my axes, I'm not drawing anything else in pen. Okay, that's the only thing I'm going to put in pen on my graph. Okay, you don't even have to put your axes in pen. I just choose to, so I can see the difference in my lines.
What's that little circle mean, like on 0, 0?
The origin.
Oh.
It's identifying where the origin is for you.
If we forget that, is that going to be like a huge
No, that's
ordeal?
just trying to make the origin. It's just trying to make the origin stand out for you.
Okay.
That's not a big deal.
Does that line go off forever or no?
That edge will go on forever.
What did you say? I heard something.
I think I just found a discovery. Do you think this little slot right here is meant for a ruler? Because look, I just like, it fits perfectly.
That's what it's meant for.
Is it?
You better not steal my ruler.
I'm not, but look.
You better remember that you get a rule.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that.
Okay. So, in order, you guys agree that there is currently an edge missing between points B and point C, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what we have to do is we have to create the perpendicular bisector between points B and C. Now, after reading through this textbook, they have come up with a new way that I hadn't seen yet on how to write perpendicular bisector. Okay, so what this textbook says is this textbook says PB is perpendicular bisector, and then in parentheses beside it you write what 2 points you're finding the perpendicular bisector of. So in this case, we're finding the perpendicular bisector of BC. Honestly, at this point, I don't care. You can just stay, if you want to stay using pencil, stay using pencil. Okay? Okay? So in order to find the perpendicular bisector of segment BC, what 2 things do we need to do? We need to know the midpoint. Okay? So talk to me about its midpoint. What are the 2 x values?
Negative.
Negative 2
-2,
and
-2 and +2 are the 2 x values over 2. What are the 2 y values? 1 plus what? 3. Very good. Divided by 2. So what does that make the midpoint of our perpendicular bisector? 0, 2. Okay. Go ahead and plot that point. 0, 2.
Now is that line going to be running through that thing?
We're gonna get there in just a second. Hang on. You can have that for just 1 second. I like where you're getting at. I like where your head's going. Okay. Is that the only thing we need? No. What else do we have to do? We need to find the slope. Now remember, in order to find the slope of a perpendicular line, first you must find the slope of the original line, correct? Okay, so y2, doesn't matter which one you call y2, So 3 minus 1 over, now because I said 3 first, what other value do I have to say first? 2. And I'm not going to say minus negative 2, am I? What am I going to say? Plus 2. So 3 minus 1, 2, 2 plus 2, 4. The slope of the norm of the line BC was 1/2. What does that make my perpendicular slope?
-2.
It makes my perpendicular slope -2. Okay? Now here is the one cool thing that I have found to help you guys out. Normally we need the slope and another point, right? And then we'd have to plug it into point slope form and go. The way this book teaches this is plot your midpoint and just start counting the slope from there. So there's no reason to actually go back and plug this into an equation. So the slope of -2, 1 means to go up 2 to the left 1, up 2 to the left 1. Now what else do I need to do? Down 2 into the left 1.
You mean right or left?
Right, I'm sorry. Yeah. Now look at what happens here.
Oh, are we gonna have to stop?
You'll plot it through that point.
Now, guys, look up at mine first before you do anything. Okay? Do you see right here at that vertex? We stop, right? Even though my next point went through this graph, I'm not actually going to go there. Why am I not going to go there?
Because you just can't. You just don't.
Cutting into.
Because then you'd be cutting into cell D, exactly. There's no need for us to cut into cell D. Okay? Because that does not interfere anywhere else, we can go ahead and make that line solid. Okay? And ladies and gentlemen, there you go.
Is that supposed to be pretty easy, or is it going to get a lot harder?
Will it always be?
Yeah, is it always going to be that simple?
So,
What's the catch?
this is the easiest of the ones you're going to see. And the reason that this is the easiest of the ones that you're going to see is when I drew this perpendicular bisector down, do you see how it met at this vertex?
Yeah.
Okay, this vertex right here is splitting up what two cells? This vertex is closest to what two cells?
C and
C and B, right?
Yes.
And then also D, right? Okay, when you get to a more complex problem, what's going to happen is if this meets at a point, because you were just creating the perpendicular bisector between that, you're fine, you're done. I will show you a problem in a minute where it's called adding a site. So you have all your points in here and then they add one. When you draw your perpendicular bisector, if it meets at a vertice, what happens? You have to draw the perpendicular bisector between your new site and the site that it's closest to, because that's going to change all of your perpendicular bisectors a little bit. So instead of having to do it once in a problem, you could have to end up drawing 4 perpendicular bisectors.
There
Okay,
are gonna be ones like that in our homework.
100%. Okay, so here's where I need you to be honest with me. If all you're doing is drawing one perpendicular bisector between one set of points, is that easy?
I
Okay.
would say it's easy, but it's not hard.
It's not the hard thing yet? Okay. Guys, I'm going to stop right there on 17B, because everything that we're about to spend the rest of the time on class is what to do when you've got multiple sites, multiple lines to draw. Okay? So, we are now in section 17C. Okay?
And they have a one.
In section 17C is called, is adding a site.
This is just with the city.
Okay? Adding a site. 427. We are to 427 now, yeah. Okay? All right, so look at that opening problem on page 427. Eventually. Okay, so that Voronoi diagram shows 3 hospitals, A, B, and C in a city. A new hospital is being marked at site D, and site D is marked in red. When it's completed, the Voronoi diagram must be updated to include a cell corresponding to site D. The new site currently lies in cell B, so some areas were previously closest to hospital B will now change and be closest to hospital D. So what we are going to do is we are going to redraw this Voronoi diagram, and when we redraw it, it's going to be completed with our new site, site D. Okay? So first thing we've got to do is draw the existing Voronoi diagram. Okay. time, draw your graphs. Make them look good so we can make sure that we're accurate when we solve this. Okay, so in order to reconstruct this Voronoi diagram, what two cells need to be split up?
B and C.
B and D. Yeah, we need to definitely split up cell B and cell D because right now they're in the same cell. Okay? So in order to do that, how do we split them up? Perpendicular bisector. Exactly. We got to do the perpendicular bisector of line BD. Okay, so let's do that. Perpendicular bisector of line BD. What do you want to find first? Midpoint. Okay. So you guys go ahead, start working on finding the midpoint of BD. Come on guys, you know how to find the midpoint. You don't need help on this. What do we think? Yes or no? We get the midpoint was 3-2?
Yes.
Okay. You're not allowed to miss that. Alright. So plot that midpoint. Okay, have you found the slope yet, or is that what you're working on still? Some of you already found it? Did you get the slope of line BD to be positive 2? Yeah, positive 2. So what does that mean for your perpendicular slope? Negative 1/2. Okay, so go right there to your midpoint and just start counting the slope from right there. Okay? Negative 1/2, down 1 to the right 2. Or we could go up 1 into the left 2. Okay? Now, why are we allowed to stop right there?
Because we found the vertex and everything.
Yeah, you found a new vertex. Okay? So there's no need to go any further. You found a new vertex. Okay? Now, here's the issue. This vertex right here is on the line, is on the edge, separating what cell? A and D. Guys, I'm going to label this point right here V1. And the reason I'm going to call that V1 is because that's the brand new vertex that we've just installed in this problem. Okay? So here's where it takes a slight hiccup, a little bit more work. Anytime you create a new vertex on a new cell, you must draw the perpendicular bisector from the site that you added, which is D, to the cell that's touching that vertex, the cell that's adjacent to that vertex. So this line right here is equidistant from D and A. So we need to construct a new perpendicular bisector between those two sites. Okay? Because remember, right now, what is this solid line? It's the perpendicular bisector between what? Between A and B. It is not the line between A and D. We still need a line between A and D. Okay? So, one more time, perpendicular bisector, except this time it's for A and D. Okay? Sorry. Perpendicular bisector for A and D. Okay. Guys, what can you tell me about the slope of the line that would connect points A and D? Look at that line that would connect points A and D. What would it be? All lines are straight. The slope is 0, which means it's what type of a line? It's a horizontal line, correct? What type of a line is perpendicular to a horizontal line? A vertical line. Okay? So because the slope of line AD is 0, because it would be a horizontal line, the perpendicular line that's going to run through the midpoint of 1, 4 has to be vertical. Okay. Now, when you draw that, guys, does that make sense why it's vertical?
Yeah.
Perpendicular line to a horizontal line is a vertical line. Okay. Now, this only touched at that vertex one, that new vertex 1, right? It did not touch anywhere else. So because it does not come in contact and create any new vertices, it means there is no need to draw another perpendicular bisector. All you have to do is clean your graph up now. Okay? So there are 3 things we need to do to clean up this graph if you've drawn it the way I have. What line do you have to erase? Tell me why this line has to get erased. Guys, you can't have a perpendicular bisector running through the middle of another cell. That perpendicular bisector was extending into cell D. It's no longer needed because that's no longer the dividing point. Okay? And then make your other two, those two perpendicular bisectors that we just drew in, we're just gonna go back and make those solid. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, once you have built that hospital at Site D, there is the brand new Voronoi diagram of the city.
So this is.
Okay? That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
I thought you said this was gonna be like a wake up call.
That wasn't terrible.
You were like
It's just
sounding like
a
Mr.
lot.
Hearn last class.
It's just
Welcome to
really
class.
fun, and it just takes long.
So, let's go ahead then. If you feel,
And take the test.
if we're
That's fine.
if we're feeling good and we're feeling ourselves,
I don't know.
okay?
I don't know about all that.
Yeah,
I don't know about all
I
that.
wouldn't say we're going that far. I mean,
Hey,
17
I'm just
feet.
living.
let's work on example 5. Okay, so the next example, okay, is going to be example 5 on page 428. Okay, again, if you can, completely cover up page 429. Don't look at it.
Oh.
Try to block 429.
Why would they do that to us?
All right. So the first thing, now, guys, very briefly, if you look at that diagram, do you see in the example or the box it says redraw that Voronoi diagram with an additional site at E -1, 1? If you look at the graph, where did they actually draw E?
-2.
-2, 1. Draw it at -2, 1. Do not draw it at -1, 1.
Wait a hot minute.
It is a typo in the book.
Okay. Can I redo that in my book
No.
so I don't get confused? No. Okay.
Wait, what?
They don't. I don't want you.
Yeah.
Okay, right in the book. Change that -1 to a -2 in the textbook. That's fine. That's fine.
Change it to -2.
Yeah. So the point should be -2, 1, not -1, 1. Okay. I know it is, but if I'm not teaching this class in a couple of years, maybe the teacher's not going to be. Well, let's be honest. The teacher's definitely not going to be as smart as me.
No.
So they're not going to be able to realize that.
By looking at the E.
That's so weird.
That's nice.
That is nice. You actually, that means you care. I appreciate it.
Do you want to become a principal one day, or did you just get your like administration
No, I
degree just for
absolutely want to be a
fun?
principal one day.
Why?
Look, another Mr. King.
Why?
Yeah.
And he has the power.
A why
True.
not kind of thing?
Truthfully, if you want me to be 100% honest with you,
I really did.
no, I want to try something new. I've taught all the different classes that I can teach. I just don't want to do the same thing for 30 some odd years. I like to mix it up a little bit. And you know, if I
Let's just get a completely new drawing. Like, that'd be fun.
because that would be intimidating. I don't want to leave Creek.
Oh, you wouldn't take Mr. Mills about notice.
No, I want to
Ooh.
be an assistant principal first. I don't know if I don't think I'm mature enough to be responsible enough to run an entire school. Run an academy? Yeah, I can do that. The entire school?
Would you be, which one would you do?
Yeah, what's your dream academy?
I will. Anything that they told me that I could. I'm boxing Mr. Crosby the first one. No. He's sneaky strong.
Were you supposed to draw those yellow lines?
That like, you don't think.
Those
Yes.
those yellow lines are the boundaries,
Yes.
are the edges. Yes, draw those. Those are the edges between A, B, and C and D.
So now I see why they have that little circle, because it kind of like separates.
It doesn't, it helps out a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the origin. They put that little circle in the middle to represent it.
And then all of a sudden there's E.
I'm so sorry, bro.
I know you're having a rough day, Brooke, but did Miss Ahern at least help you out? Did Miss Ahern help you out?
I have 47F now.
Instead of a 38.
I have a 25 F in that class.
I have 50.
So y'all lucky compared to me.
Everybody has an F in her class.
I know, the
How?
whole class has an F.
Because of these HI questions.
I don't have an
She
F
has
in
them
her
with the
class.
HI grade.
She put a 0 out of 50 in for me.
Same.
No, I have.
Marco, me too. Wait, what's your grade again?
47F.
I have a record. I'm a 25 F, not to flex.
I had a 38.
Not to
but
flex.
I know.
Not to flex, but to flex.
Yeah, I left her.
She just has an F.
She just has a R grade.
We're gonna have to redraw like every single line.
Yup.
Why'd that sound like the Storage Wars guy? David, that was. Yep.
Here, George.
Because that's exactly what I was going for.
Were you really though?
Yeah, because Storage Wars is awesome.
That was the show. The original people on that show. That when it was good.
I can't stand all the people that are on it now.
I know. I stopped
I
watching
stopped
it.
watching. Okay. So, first step. What's the first perpendicular bisector that we have to draw?
Ease.
DE. Why do we have to start with D and E? Because they're in the same cell, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's step one. Draw the perpendicular bisector of line DE. Okay? So you guys start working on that. I'll work on it too. Find the midpoint of DE, find the slope of DE. And that's where we will start. So answer me this, guys. Did you find out that the midpoint was -3,0?
Yes.
Did you find out that the slope was 1, which meant the perpendicular slope was -1? Okay, when you drew that line in, do you see that it created 2 vertices?
Yes.
It created a vertex on this horizontal line, and it created a vertex on this vertical line, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the horizontal line, what is that actually touching? What other cell? A. So what does that mean?
We have to draw a new, like.
You need to find the perpendicular bisector of AE. Okay, what other vertex 2 that's touching C? So what does that mean? You need to do the perpendicular bisector of EC as well. Because E is the new point. So you do the perpendicular bisector of E to A and E to C. You're only drawing new perpendicular bisectors from your new point.
Which one would you recommend starting with? D and C or A and B? Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I'm going to start with. Thank you. I'm going to start with A and E just because that's the one I labeled vertex 1. But honestly, it doesn't matter. Okay, guys, pause for a second before you start moving on. Remember, anytime your new perpendicular bisector creates a vertex, whatever region or cell it is coming in contact with now means you need a new perpendicular bisector between the brand new point and the cell that it's coming in contact with. So that's why we have to do the perpendicular bisector of EA, because this point right here is on the cell A. Yes, it's also on cell D, but look what you just did. You already drew the perpendicular bisector between E and D. So that's why you need it between A and E. That's why you also need it between E and C, because the second vertex is on cell C. So do both of those. It does not matter what order you do those in. Okay?
I'll use eyeball.
See, while you're going, we did 2 tests of this and the final for this class.
You just like.
I'll work it out. Work it out.
Yeah, we finished the semester. We're on year 2 of our math now. We finished this school year. Yeah, we passed into that. You think?
So we only do the ones that can bring to E.
Yeah, every one of these has to do with E because E is the only new site that you're at.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, like, we only do the ones that separate.
Now,
Not B, C.
No, because B, the perpendicular bisector of BC is right here. It's already in there. Yeah, those lines are already drawn.
Every single one of them.
Here's the line that separates BC It also conveniently separates AD.
So you have to do BE and CE.
Did one of your, well, we have to do CE because this vertex right here is on CE. Yeah, after you do AB. AB, the perpendicular bisector. Guys, the only time you will draw a new perpendicular bisector is in relation to the new site E. You will no longer use AB, AC, AD. Those don't get used anymore. The only time you draw a new perpendicular bisector is if it relates to the new site E. Okay? On AE, did you get the midpoint was negative 3, 3?
Yes.
Did you get the slope of AE was negative 2, which means the perpendicular slope is positive 1/2, correct? Okay, so I plot the point negative 3, 3.
Now it always, or no, yeah, it always, we always want to be that lucky where like it lands on, like in this case vertex 1.
Yes.
Yes.
Say
Like,
what now?
will it always like land, like where it landed on vertex 1 this time, like the bisector, would it always do that or no?
It should.
It should.
I think it got it, like, the first little thing.
Okay, if we draw that perpendicular bisector in with a slope of positive 1/2, Charles pointed out something nice, that it intersected at vertex 1. We've already used vertex 1, but what else did it do? It created a new vertice. Okay, I'm going to call that vertex 3. I'm calling it vertex 3 because I've already had vertex 1 and vertex 2. Now, this vertex is on this vertical line, which separates what two sites?
B.
It separates B and A. Well, we already have a perpendicular bisector between E and A, so we don't need to worry about that. But because this point is equidistant from A and B, you must now draw a perpendicular bisector between B and E. So in this problem, yes, you're going to end up drawing a perpendicular bisector between all 4 of them. I'm personally going to choose to do the one between C and E right now, just because that's where vertex E was, or the vertex 2 was at. So I go on to my next perpendicular bisector.
What are you doing? We can't go through
I hope you got very lucky. Or did you do your equations on that page? Oh,
kind of.
if you get anything wrong in IB and you have no work, shows you get 0 credit. Because there's nothing to give you, there's nothing to grade your work on. So just be careful.
I think it's got it right about.
Just be careful. Okay.
Like they give you no credit at all.
At all.
Oh yeah, and that's another question. Do you
You
get?
haven't shown work where they have to grade you on. You just write an answer. So if you get it wrong, it's a 0.
Mr. Riddle?
That's why I show every single thing that I do. Okay, guys, your midpoint of CE should be the origin. It should be 0, 0. You should find out that the slope of line CE is negative 1/2, which means its perpendicular slope is positive 2. positive 2. Well, would you look at that?
Oh, Lord, help us.
Guess what?
I'm Mr. Riddle, but I'll be glad to help you.
Oh snap! Did they not?
What did I do wrong?
I can't tell which one is, okay.
Wait,
I know
wait,
what-
hold on, wait, hold on.
Okay, so
Oh, I see
When-
what I see.
when you draw that line, it creates a new vertex. Okay? But ladies and gentlemen, please don't overthink this. Okay? 'Cause I think some of you are just making this way more complicated than it needs to be. This vertex, vertex 4, is on the line, is on the edge separating what two cells? B and C, correct? Okay, well, bless you. We've already got the perpendicular bisector of E and C. We already knew we had to find the perpendicular bisector of B and E. So this point right here doesn't cause us any extra work. You already had to find the perpendicular bisector of BE. Which is the final thing that you need to do when you're drawing this.
Now, I'm probably gonna, I don't know. Is the last line, like the line that separates BE, is it pretty self-explanatory or no?
Say what?
Is it pretty the line that separates BE, is that pretty self-explanatory?
Should be.
Okay. So if we're running out of time, we could just draw it and we would still get credit pretty much, as long as we draw it right.
Okay, so I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So with the last one, are we just allowed to like connect the two? Or do we have to show our map of how it does?
I'm always going to show my map. And that's just because if I make a mistake, I'm not willing to give up 3 points. Because here's the issue. When you're working on something like this on your own, and you're not working on it with me, are you going to be 100% confident that you haven't made a mistake up to this point?
No.
If you are, that's fantastic, and I'm extremely proud that you feel that way. But it's better to show your work, to have something for IB to grade in case you get it wrong. That way they can give you partial credit. So that's why no matter what, I will show my work for everything. Just because I'm not willing to lose 3 points from IB. Right? And again, that's just,
I was wondering what happens when you actually have to put the lines through? Would you only put the lines through these points? Where it goes?
so your midpoint is 0, 3. The slope of line BE, we got 1 minus 5 over -2 minus 2. So 1 minus 5 is -4. -2 minus -2 is -4. So the slope of line BE is +1, which means the perpendicular slope is -1, which conveniently for us does fit exactly what we needed it to.
Did we do it? Are we finished?
You're not finished because number one, you've got a whole bunch of erasing and point connect or line connecting to do. So all of those boundaries that you just made around point E,
We can connect.
those all need to be solidified.
But what about the vertices that they go through? What about the edges?
I don't know if I'm.
We gotta figure it out.
Huh?
Okay, so you've got that part of the diagram drawn. when you go back and you go to erase part of the original boundary, guys, this is all you got to think about. Erase any of the boundary that's inside of cell E. That's it. You are erasing any part of the edge that is inside of cell E. Those are the only lines that you erase. Okay? So I can erase this line right there because that's completely inside of cell E. Touch that up. I can also get rid of this vertical line that's inside of cell E. Now, do you remember way back at the beginning of this when I told you that I would always draw my origin, my x and my y axis in pen?
Yes.
This is precisely why I draw my x and my y axis in pen, so I don't get confused and try to erase it. Okay? This vertical line has to stay inside of E because it's the origin. That's not a boundary line. Okay? How many of you tried to, you don't have to raise your hand, but think about it. How many of you tried erasing that line or this line right here because it was in the middle of E? Okay? It's your x and your y axis. You're not allowed to do that. Okay? And that's more realistic to what you're going to see on your exam. Okay. Do you have your honey badge?
Do you have an another?
Do you have a pair of scissors I could borrow?
Yeah. Say what? At least two.
I'm gonna cut these out.
What is really on?
Everything that was covered.
What is like
Everything that we covered.
Take your notes.
Chapter 1, Chapter 4, and Chapter 17.
No, it's not.
Everything over the 2 years that you learned. Yeah, every single thing that you've learned over the course of 2 years. Okay? Guys, be realistic. Talk to me.
It's just I'm time consuming.
I think I'm just.
Say what?
It just takes a lot of time.
You're what?
I'm gonna lose it.
Why? Are you a neat person, and if there's erase marks, you get mad?
I would not, I'm a very slow test taker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this will take me a good 25 minutes on the test, and I won't have time to finish anything else.
I would agree.
That's what I'm
There we
afraid
go.
of.
Then I'm just gonna fail all my tests basically because I don't finish.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have seen that in the past. As long as you're not the person that, when you're taking a test, you sit there and stare off into the infinite nothingness, then you're okay.
No, I literally work the entire hour and a half in there.
Yeah.
Plus, I feel like there's a lot of steps I might all mess up, and then the entire problem will be wrong.
Well, that's why you show all your work. That way you can get as much partial credit as possible.
So you do get partial credit on tests?
IB gives 100% partial credit.
Okay.
Okay.
No, like on your test.
IB gives partial credit.
Okay.
So I grade exactly the way IB grades.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we doing another example?
No. Okay. Do you understand why we drew the 4 new perpendicular bisectors that we did?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
You go there.
It's a great question.
You go there.
Your homework
Oh.
page 425, numbers 8 and 9, and then page 430, number 2 and 5. Okay, so keep this in mind. Anybody that is absent on Wednesday, all you are missing is the review. You you are missing no new content, which means if you miss Thursday, or you miss Wednesday and you show up on Friday, you'll walk back in and take the test because I did not teach any new content. Okay? The last thing I tell you before I shut up for the day, your reviews are the one assignment that I will never collect. Reviews are just to benefit you, to get you prepared for questions that you could see on the exam. Okay?
So will you give us like homework Wednesday night?
We're doing it, we're going until Friday. We're saying Friday right now. Okay? Just be prepared for your exam on Friday. Okay? If you go in expecting me to change it and when I don't, you're going to be extremely disappointed if you did not prepare for your exam to be on Friday. Okay? Wednesday in class, the only thing you're going to do is work on a review.
Oh, you give reviews out?
Well, I give you problems to work on out of your
Yeah.
textbook.
Okay.
Yep.
Number 8 I don't understand what
The equation of the perpendicular bisector.
Yes.
Find the slope. Find the midpoint. You're located in point slope form.
See, look, Caitlin. Oh, I should stop recording this now.